Hi, I'm Anirban Chatterjee. I do product marketing here at Sonar, and I'm really excited today to take you through the results of our State of Code research, where we actually asked developers about how they are adopting AI coding tools and how that experience is going for them. One thing that we've been hearing about a lot in the industry is that the hottest new programming language right now is English. And it's because developers are using English as well as their native languages to prompt AI tools to help them write code at a much higher rate than they ever had before. Even 6 months ago, this wasn't as much the case as it is right now. Andrej Karpathy, one of the former leaders at OpenAI and currently founder of Eureka Labs, said in January of this year that AI coding is easily the biggest change to his basic coding workflow in the 2 decades of programming that he's done. And it happened just over the course of a few weeks. That is how rapidly things are changing for software engineers in this space. So where are we right now? We know that it's no longer a future tense statement that AI is touching code. It's actually touching the majority of code right now, whether it's assisting developers or as an agent working autonomously to help write code for them in the background. We also know, based on what developers tell us and based on experience, that AI code can be less reliable and more complex, which increases the challenges involved in doing code review on that AI-generated code effectively. We also know that AI tools are generating more verbose code based on our LLM research that one of my colleagues took you through today. And we also know that more verbose code is vastly expanding the amount of code that needs to be reviewed by developers. And finally, we know that AI code, despite these challenges, is already being used for mission-critical applications where quality and security and maintainability are of paramount importance. So, what does that mean? How is it actually going with developers right now as they adopt this brand new technology as part of their workflow? This is what the State of Code Developer Survey Report is all about. SonarQube is one of the most widely adopted solutions for code quality around the world, and we've already published a number of reports exploring this space over the course of the past 6 months or so, looking at code reliability, security, maintainability that we see in SonarQube, and some of the coding styles that leading LLMs are exhibiting. This is actually research that we update on an ongoing basis. But we also wanted to couple that data exploration with actual research of asking developers how their experiences are going. And so what we did with this survey report is we surveyed developers writing code and collaborating with AI to write code to find out what their experience is like and how it's been evolving over time. If you want to read any of these reports in detail, you can go to the URL on the screen, sonarsource.com/research, to get not only this report, but every other research report that we've done at Sonar. But for this report specifically, it was a quantitative survey done online where we actually went to professional software developers throughout the month of October of last year. The final sample size included just over 1,100 people distributed globally, and the responses went across a spectrum of countries and seniority levels, junior and senior developers, as well as different company sizes like SMBs and enterprises and everybody in between. We also made sure to ensure that every responder was 18 years or older, was employed either full-time or self-employed in a technology role. Most of these folks worked in software engineering, and that they were either writing code actively as part of the role or managing developers writing code using at least one programming language that we care about at Sonar. I'm going to summarize the top 5 findings that we found in this survey. As I mentioned, you can go get all of the findings from the survey download site I mentioned earlier. But let's start with the first finding, which is that 72% of developers who have tried AI use it nearly every day, which is a big stat. I was expecting it to be 50 or 60%. 72% was a surprise to me. The interesting thing about this is that they're using it not just for prototyping and experimentation, which is what the vast majority of usage was maybe even a year ago. They've actually progressed well beyond that to 58% of developers telling us they're using it for production software, for business critical and mission critical services. There's also a wide variety of use cases that developers are using AI tools for. You'll see a whole list of use cases that we asked about on the left-hand side of your screen right now, as well as a cluster of dots that show not only how often developers tell us they use AI for that use case, but how effective they believe the AI tool was for that use case. I want to call out 2 particular use cases specifically. The first one, .A, writing documentation. This is the use case that developers felt was most effective. About 75% effective rate for AI to write documentation. However, that wasn't the most often used use case. That honor falls to assisting development of new code. Basically, most developers, about 9 out of 10 developers told us they are using AI tools to assist development of new code, even though they believe it is only a little over 50% effective at that task, which is interesting. The second big finding from this survey, 96% of developers don't fully trust that AI-generated code is functionally correct. Now, if you look at the pie chart here, you'll see that we have 4% of responders telling us that they completely agree with the statement that they trust AI code is functionally correct. This means that 96% of folks at least have some level of doubt about whether that code coming out of the AI tool is functionally correct or not. However, only 48% of developers are actively always checking the code coming out. So you have this situation where 96% of developers don't fully trust the output, but less than half of those developers telling us that they always run that through a code review process before checking it in, which was surprising to me. The third set of findings from our survey are all about the top tools being used by developers to write AI-generated code. As you can see, the top tools on the list here are GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT, which are no surprise to anybody. Following right behind them are Claude and Claude Code, Gemini, and Cursor. And then the rest of the list are just other tools that we asked about. With the bottom row, others, is just a collection of all of the other tools that we asked about, along with tools that were written in by developers as part of the survey. GitHub Copilot being near the top of the list is no surprise, because many of the developers that we speak to, especially in the professional sense, are GitHub customers. They're basically using GitHub as part of writing and shipping code in their work. And so Copilot being available to them just makes it an obvious move to use Copilot as part of code development. ChatGPT is also an extremely popular tool for a number of reasons, including generating code, and Claude Code has become very popular lately to write code. The interesting thing for me, though, is how these tools are actually being accessed by all the different software engineers that we asked. So what's interesting is, for Perplexity, as an example, the majority of developers using Perplexity as part of the professional work were accessing it through a personal account. With ChatGPT, it was about 50-50, with half of developers telling us they use it through a work-sanctioned account and half using it through a personal account. No surprise, Copilot is at the bottom of the screen here, showing that 78% of developers were accessing it through a work-sanctioned account, whereas only 17% are accessing it through a personal account. And Amazon is right there at the same fraction of work-sanctioned versus personal account. The surprising thing was that if you take all of the top 10 tools and average them together, about 35% of the usage from developers were using them via personal accounts, which is an interesting finding and probably something that would be concerning to a CTO or a CIO type person who is trying to make sure that developers are using approved tools in a safe way and not inadvertently leaking information that's not firewalled properly through a corporate account. And so that's something that we'll be paying more attention to as we go forward, because I fully expect that as we get further into 2026 and beyond, the number of tools that are available for developers to use will start to consolidate, and we'll start to pick some winners and losers and have fewer numbers of tools that developers are using at one time. Because right now, developers are using on average 4 different tools as part of the professional work to write code. There's probably 1 or 2 that are work sanctioned, and there are others that are being used through a personal account for them to do their jobs. The fourth set of findings from our survey is all about developer toil, which is an area that we know is interesting not only to developers, but also to their leaders. We asked developers if they believed AI tools help them reduce the toil in their workday, and 75% of them told us that AI does help them reduce their toil. But the interesting thing is, it didn't actually. We also asked developers to tell us what they actually spend their time on during the workday. We gave them a whole list of tasks, and we asked them to assign percentages to all of them. And so we know where they spent their workday, whether it was a toil task or not. And when we added up the amount of time they actually spent on toil work, we found that it was around 25%. And the interesting thing is, we actually separated the group of developers into a group of frequent AI users and a group of developers who didn't use AI as frequently. And the amount of time that they both spent on toil work independently was about the same, about a quarter of their time. You'll see that there's a blue curve and a red curve, where the red curve is users who are using AI frequently, and the blue curve is users who are using AI less frequently, and they're nearly on top of each other. So what that's telling us is that AI is not so much reducing the toil that developers are experiencing, but it's changing its shape, changing the way they actually spend their workday, and just moving the toil from some tasks to others, we actually asked about some of these tasks, which is what this next chart is about. And you'll see here, we have a dark blue bar that shows how much developers told us they spent time on that Toil task, the dark blue bar being users who were using AI multiple times per day. And then the light blue bars indicate developers who are using AI weekly or occasionally, so a little bit less often. And so you'll see we have different levels of people assigning their day to that particular Toil task, whether they were using AI frequently or not. A couple of things I want to call out on this slide. First of all, the two rows with red bars. Those are areas showing that AI actually increased toil in those particular areas, specifically managing tech debt, which we know is something that AI can potentially do if it's not controlled effectively, because it'll add verbosity, add complexity to code if it's not managed properly. So it's no surprise that people who are using AI frequently are spending more time managing the tech debt that is resulting from using AI. The fourth one on the list here, correcting or rewriting code created by AI coding tools. Well, obviously developers who are using AI frequently are going to spend more time on that kind of toil work. The two rows with blue arrows, on the other hand, these indicate areas where developers who use AI less frequently experience more toil than developers using AI more frequently. These are areas where we believe AI is actually helping developers be more effective at those tasks. For example, debugging legacy or poorly documented code. This is an area where we know AI can be helpful in helping especially junior developers find their way in a new code base. And also finding information or understanding existing systems. Again, helping understand what's happening in a code base that you may be less familiar with is something that AI excels at, and is one of the use cases that have been called out for AI as working particularly well. So it's no surprise that developers who use AI frequently are spending less time on toil in those areas. One thing that has come up over and over again is that when you want to use AI effectively, you want to be able to put guardrails on how that AI is used and how the AI is actually optimized for your workflow and also for your organization. Those guardrails can take multiple forms, but one of the most effective guardrails that we have found is actually using SonarQube to control quality in a code base, and using SonarQube to make sure that as AI code is getting generated, it is being evaluated in a consistent way, in a way that is the same throughout the entire organization, so that developers have a little bit of help in taking the massive amount of code, the volume of code that is being generated by AI coding tools, and running it through a regime of automated and manual code review that is assisted by SonarQube. And so it's one thing that we found when we looked at SonarQube users in our survey versus non-SonarQube users in our survey, is that SonarQube users are seeing better success metrics more often than non-SonarQube users when they are adopting AI. They're basically getting more ROI faster out of AI coding tools than users who are not benefiting from having SonarQube available to them. For example, we find that there are SonarQube users reporting lower vulnerability rates in AI-generated code 24% more often than non-SonarQube users. They're also reporting lower defect rates 20% more often than non-SonarQube users, lower rework and patch costs 18% more often than non-SonarQube users, lower tech debt 16% more often, and higher overall code quality 12% more often than non-SonarQube users. This is something that we're going to continue to evaluate as we do more versions of this survey, but we feel pretty confident in saying that SonarQube users are actually getting more ROI from AI than non-SonarQube users because of the guardrails that allow them to have consistent standards of quality throughout the entire code base, whether the code is being written by a developer that's human or a developer that's powered by an AI. Those are all the findings we're going to cover today. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. There's chat rooms available in this event that you can join and ask questions about the survey if you like. I also highly recommend that you go to our website that I went through earlier, sonarsource.com/research, if you want to download the full report, along with any of the research that we've done. Thank you very much for joining me today.